Okay, let's just finish up the second part of this discussion, and I know this is a lot to take in, but again, these are the key elements that I notice that students typically have some problems with. So I was discussing this, what we call a block quotation here in the sample paper. Any quotation that's longer than 40 words, a direct quotation, needs to be set off from the rest of the text in a way that we can all sort of understand this. And you'll see that there's no quotation marks here. The formatting of the citation at the end is a little bit different. You'll notice that here they included the information about the source, Henry J. Kaiser Foundation, 2004. We can look that up in the references page. But then we introduce this quote. So in your papers, if you have these long quotes, which students often try to have in their papers, you're going to get two comments from me. Either if you haven't formatted it correctly so that it's in a block quote, you're going to lose points because you're not following proper APA format. If you are also overusing direct quotes, you're just really cutting and pasting a lot of information from sources that you're just kind of sticking into your paper and you're not trying to paraphrase or put into your own words, that's really not the approach we want to take with this level of writing. And the other issue that we sometimes have occur, and you'll see this in Turnitin when the students submit their papers, Turnitin will highlight several sections of the text like this. It'll be in red, and it'll be shown to be material from another source. And oftentimes students will cite this. They'll tell me where the source comes from. But what they're not doing is they're not putting in quotation marks this material that is directly quoted from another source. So it's not enough just to cite it. You really, if it's not your own work, if it's not your own writing, let me repeat that, if it's not your own words, it has to be in quotation marks. And Turnitin will mark it. And so this happens all the time with students these days, writers these days, is that they're including information, they are citing it, and they think, well, I'm in the clear because I've cited it, but they're not quoting it. They're not indicating what is their own words and what is the words from the source that they're citing from, and so therefore that is basically plagiarism. So make sure that you avoid that. And the better thing to do, rather than using these long quotes, is to paraphrase, summarize the information in your own words, and only directly quote the material that's really exceptional, really interesting, really summarizes your source very well, can't really be reproduced in another way. Otherwise, it should really be in your own words. I'm going to jump to the works cited page on this sample document that comes from a source, this APA handbook. So it really is sort of an official source. And you'll notice that there's lots of good information to the side here. I want to stress these things for your works cited page, though. Notice references, okay? References at the top. It's not bibliography. It's not works cited. It's references, okay? MLA uses the term works cited. APA uses the term references. And everything that's included in your references list should be something that is actually cited in the paper itself. So don't include anything here that doesn't have some sort of discussion or citation in your main paper. Note also the formatting here so that we have everything is double spaced. There's not these extra white spaces between references and the first citation or the first reference here. There's not extra space between each of the citations. How we can tell when we have a new citation is through this hanging indent. Everything is double spaced, hanging indent so that you have that indentation that goes out 5 extra spaces, and so those highlight the names or the titles of the references that when we see the parenthetical citation in the paper itself, we know to go look at the list of references by those things that are hanging out to the edge, and we look for either the name or the title in alphabetical order. Berkowitz, Carmona, Kreitzer, Dunwald, Henry J. Kaiser Foundation, Hiltz, Hoppen, right? So that's a very important element. And then a couple of things about the citation here of titles. This is where we get a little bit tricky, or just in general in the citations. The citation page is different in APA than what you see in the actual report itself. So in the report itself, we generally refer to our authors by their last names. In the citation page and the reference page, you'll notice that we include their initials, so their last name and initials. And you'll notice that when we have a long set of references like this, we do include every name. We don't do the et al. You still have the element where you have the date. It's kind of this is the very consistent system. Authors or titles and then date. Okay, so now we have the date in parentheses. But here's where it gets a little bit screwy. Notice the way the title here. So this is from a journal. So this is what we would call a short title or the title of an article. And there's a couple of interesting things going on here in APA that this is really tricky for students usually. Notice that this is in MLA or other systems you would put quotation marks around this because it's the title of an article within a larger work, so what we call a short title. And in APA, they don't want you to do that. They want you to just simply list it in what they call sentence case, okay? So you'll notice that only the first word is capitalized, just like a regular sentence, and the rest of it is in lowercase. And again, more typically in other systems, you would see title case, which has every major word capitalized, okay? So that's not what's going on here, and it's not in quotation marks. Now, because this is a journal, APA is a little bit unusual in this regard. They ask you to have the journal title in italics and in title case, okay? Italics and in title case. That's the only situation that is kind of normal that we see in all the other citation systems is the same way. If you go down a little bit further here, you'll notice that here is a large title or a long title that normally would be all capitalized in title case, and it would be in italics, and here it is simply in italics. It's a standalone title, but it is not in sentence. It's in sentence case. It's not in title case because it's not the title of a journal. Same way here with the book. I mentioned this in the other video. This is a book. Normally, you would expect it to be in title case, fat, capitalized, land, capitalized, but instead it's a book. It's in italics, but it's not in this sort of sentence case or title case. Only journals are in title case. I know this is confusing, but that's just the way it is in APA. They have a weird sort of way of thinking about titles and especially these short titles. These article titles are in the references page always just lowercase, and they're not in quotation marks. When you cite them in your paper, though, they need to be in title case, so that they need to have every word capitalized, and they need to be in quotation marks. So that's oftentimes a very large source of confusion for students. And then also, with these journals, you'll notice that there's a number given usually, and this is the volume. And then if it's, depending on how it's paginated, if it's got a monthly journal with all of its numbers consecutive from one journal to the next, it will have issue numbers as well. So here you have a volume number 289 and the pages that are in that particular journal that are being covered. Elsewhere you might see other journals. Here you have a New York Times, page 826. Let's see if I can find another journal. Obesity Research 10. None of these have issues numbers with them, but the New England Journal of Medicine 346. They're all volume and issue volume numbers, but just get familiar with that system of formatting the titles correctly. Drug therapy obesity is the title of this journal article here. It's confusing because it's in lowercase, but it's not in quotation marks. That's just a quirk of APA. So let's go back to the samples and take a look at an actual paper that was published last spring in my class, an actual literature review. Abby's paper. She did a nice job on her paper. It's not a perfect paper, but I think it's a good one for us to take a look at here. And I want you to sort of recognize how carefully she especially focused on in her APA formatting. So if you'll notice, one of the things that she does nicely in her draft is that she has, for example, within the Journal of Agriculture and Resource Economics, an article titled Consumers' Response to Genetically Modified Foods, Market Segment Analysis and Implications for Producers and Makers by Barker and Burnham. See how she did that? She included in her own sentence a lot of the citation information. It makes your job a lot easier because you don't have to represent as much of that stuff in parentheses. And in this case, just talking about the title formatting that we looked at earlier, Journal of Agriculture and Resources Economics. It's a long title for a journal. It's in italics. It's in title case, just like you would expect to see in a paper. The actual article itself is in quotation marks. Consumers' response to genetically modified foods. It's in title case because it has all those major words capitalized. And it has the two authors here, not with their initials, but just their last names, Barker and Burnham, not with the ampersand, but with the spelled out and you do that differently in the works cited page. So keep that example in mind. We'll look at that works cited page, or I'm sorry, the references page here in just a second. But she did all this setup very carefully on this, and she was able to get the citation quite nice. And then she included this specific information here, the location of the source, paragraph, 2001. So she really did follow a lot of the discussions we had in class with how to locate this information. So there's lots of good examples throughout her paper where she has this sort of very extensive, and what she's doing, she's discussing the source because it's a literature review, and she's taking quite a bit of time to describe and set up and contextualize the source, which is what I hope you do in your own literature reviews. We're talking about research that other people have done. So she does a really nice job of contextualizing and setting up each of those sources. Here's another example, paragraph 2 from that. Unlike the article written by Baker and Burnham on our 5th page, a second article, see how she transitions it in the next, titled Food Fight: The Politics of the Food Industry, 2012, here's the date, argues against GMO production within the U.S. The article addresses, and she's just describing the article itself, Wortman claims. Now we know if we look in the works site or in the references page, we'll see Wortman listed, and that's the article that's being discussed here. And she does a nice job of setting that up. Kurtzer and Cooper, and here this other source, Kurtzer and Cooper, 2007. A lot of contextualization here, and then a direct quote. The debate centers on the preservation of unique culinary traditions and traditional farms. Kurtzer and Cooper, 2007, the first phase, paragraph 2. And notice here, in the citation itself, you're using the ampersand instead of using and, spelled out, A-N-D, as you would. Once it goes in the citation, you have to follow those very specific APA rules. Kurtzer and Cooper, 2007, the first phase, which is a section within this larger document that doesn't have specific page numbers, paragraph 2. So here the information is located very carefully. She did a nice job of sort of setting that up. So that's really basically the way that you need to sort of orient each of the sources, discuss them sort of thoroughly in the literature review itself, because you are reviewing this scholarship or literature. Set up the sources, describe the authors, describe the study, maybe include the journal name and all that sort of stuff. It makes your job a little bit easier. But then when you go to cite all this in the references page, you have to be very careful to follow APA format. And you'll notice here we have 5 sources, pretty straightforward. Abby did a good job. She did the reverse indents. She used the term references. Barker G and Burnham T, December 2001. Notice that she has the right title format for the article itself. It's in sentence case. It's not in quotation marks, even though in the paper itself it was. Journal of Agriculture and Resources Economics. This is a journal title, so it does get the italics and the title case treatment. 26-2, so 26 is the volume, 2 is the issue number, and then the page numbers. And then she put the accessed, even though APA doesn't really require this. I just told the students that semester, be consistent. She wanted to signal to her readers that she was accessing this material through a database. If you go on APA online, they say that that's not necessary. It's a component that is required in other citation systems such as MLA, but not so much in APA. And you'll just notice that as you go through, all the citations are basically done correctly in this regard. She's using journals. It makes it easier on herself because she's following the same format, and she's using really very common sort of scholarly journals, so that makes it easy to sort of follow this format throughout. Okay, so I hope that that is useful to see both from a formatting standpoint and how you might set up these literature reviews. Both of these are excellent examples. The models that are posted in the main lessons page, please take a look at those before you turn in your final drafts. You might go back and look at that. The key is author, title, publication information. Almost every case, that is the format you need to follow. If you follow those basic guidelines, you should be in good shape. Contact me if you have any questions.